The first annual Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival, now in the last 2 weeks before entries close, is sponsoring today's episode of Robservations, episode number 557. Have you made your movie? You've got 2 weeks to do it. Anybody can make a movie in 2 weeks, right? It's easy. Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your COVID. No, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of science fiction and cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your pharaoh of physical media, and lest we forget, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am Robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Welcome to episode 557 of this, what do you call it? I guess it's not a podcast, a vlogcast. I don't know, the YouTube show. That is Robservations. It's a Monday. You know, there's less and less information or interesting stories about the entertainment industry. There's really not going to be much happening between now and the end of the year. And depending on what goes on, I might cut back on the shows. We'll be doing other shows. Obviously, Dieter Bastian's show that I've done with him is going to continue, and Whining About Movies will continue. But Robservations might cut back. Because I have stuff I've got to be doing. But that's okay. Today, however, right before I went on, a story broke that I wanted to get into a little bit. As you all know, I love going to the movies. I've been going to the movies since I was a little kid. But I haven't gone to the movies since February. I mean, I did go to see New Mutants at the Pasadena when they set up a pop-up drive-in event. And it was pretty good. Presentation was good. They used an LED screen. It was very bright. And it was a lot of fun. But it wasn't like walking into a movie theater. Like going into a movie theater for me has always been, it's like going to church. And like the Catholic Church, for me, it's very ritualistic. I do the same kind of things. I like to get my refreshments. I like to prepare them exactly the way I like them. And then I like to, of course, plan ahead of time and pre-buy my seats. Then I get to think about it for a while. And I anticipate going to the movies. And it becomes a thing for me. Then I get stressed out, even though I have reserved seats. We've got to get there in time. And I haven't gone to the movies since February. This is the longest period of time I haven't gone to the movies since, I don't know, I was probably 8, 7. Because I always went to the movies, even as a little kid. I love the movies. And it's not just that we haven't been able to go to the movies because of COVID. Now, all the cases are spiking. There's tons of people that are hospitalized now. We're back to March levels when we were all sheltering at home. But I do fear for the future of the theatrical exhibition industry. I look, as much as I love home theater, and I've been in some of my friends, my wealthy filmmaker friends that have done quite well in the business, many of them have invested in very high-end systems. I have friends that have $500,000 projectors. They're amazing. Same kind of projectors they have in movie theaters. They have them in their house. So there'll always be maybe a place to go, but it's not the same thing. And I'm very worried, obviously, because movie theaters in a pandemic, they're the last place you want to go. And I understand they're trying to hang on. There's places that you can still go to the movies, not here in LA County, but there's places you can go to the movies. You can drive down to Orange County if you want. I don't know if that's still true anymore, but I just worry about the business because, frankly, how long is a business supposed to survive when you can't go to it, and yet they still are incurring, you got to pay rent, you know? And if you're not taking in any money and money is only going out, there's only so long you can survive under those conditions. Now, one of the things that we've talked about a lot, that I've talked about a lot on this show, and that we've talked a lot about on the John Campy show, is this idea that maybe, by the way, do you guys like, I'm about ready to, I told Elizabeth, I showed her pictures of Simon Le Bon from the Wild Boys video from 1984. And when I was in high school and then going into college, I desperately wanted to get my hair as layered as Simon Le Bon's was in the Wild Boys video, spiky like that. I've been growing my hair out. You know, I'm kind of looking like an old woman, I think. But I have a method to my madness. I showed her pictures, and I said, I want to look like this. What's very funny is Xevious, who did the artwork for Let's Get Physical Media. I guess he heard me talking about this. He did this drawing of me yesterday and tweeted it out. Now, I'm not going to go that extreme, because that to me that's halfway between New Romantic and straight up Quiet Riot. I don't want that. I got to go full on New Romantic. I can't go that far, but I want to thank Xevious for continuing to crack me up with this kind of artwork. But anyway, that's the hair thing. I could either go Sonny Burnett season 5 Miami Vice, which I liked, but that was a little bit more of a 70s vibe, or I go full on rockin' the 80s Simon Le Bon Wild Boys. Maybe you should decide. Should I go Sonny Burnett season 5 Miami Vice or Simon Le Bon Wild Boys video? We'll see. What do you think? I mean, I still have hair, so I might as well, use it for fun. Now back to the question at hand. So this idea that studios are now, they're faced with quite a dilemma. Obviously, Disney was not happy about what happened with Mulan at all. It didn't work. And what they did was they put Mulan on Disney Plus, and if you paid a premium, you got to see it. I think it was like $30. I didn't do that. It didn't do well theatrically when it opened. I think it would have done much better had they opened it in the United States to full houses. But the problem is that the way I see it is that we are not conditioned. Our culture does not understand paying the kind of premium you would need to pay in order to make these large tentpole movies viable in a pay-per-view space. Because we don't understand that. We have streaming services, and it's like, well, wait a minute. A movie like Mulan's going to show up on Disney Plus anyway. Why am I going to be paying $30 to get it, to get some premium? I'll just wait till it shows up. So people don't understand, because they haven't had to do it, what it means to have a theatrical movie coming out only on pay-per-view now, and people paying a premium for it. It's just, right now, people, why would you do it? We don't live in a society that has been conditioned to do that. And if you look at the slates of the movies that are due to be released, whether it's, you've got Marvel, you've got the Eternals, and you've got Black Widow, Universal's got Fast and the Furious, Warner Brothers or MGM, or the Die Another Day. I don't know who's got that. Is it Universal who has the international rights? Pardon me, Die Another Day. No Time to Die. The point is that these are all tentpole movies that cost from $150 million on up. In the case of No Time to Die, it's a $250 million movie. In our world, those films are expected, indeed, they are counted on to generate revenues in excess of $800 million to $1 billion. That's now the number. The number you're chasing is $1 billion. And if you spend $250 million on a James Bond movie, you expect it. Indeed, you don't expect it. You've projected it. You're counting on it to make $1 billion. You want it to do Skyfall numbers. And there's no reason to think that it won't. So the studios need that money. Now, the problem is, even in its best case scenario, you can't put a movie like No Time to Die out on pay-per-view and expect people, even if they pay a premium, they don't understand why they're going to need to. And you're never going to convince enough people to spend, let's say, $50 to see No Time to Die. No one's going to do that. People will just say, well, why would I'm not going to pay $50. I mean, going to the movies is one thing. People will take a family of 4 out to the movies, and they'll spend $80 or $100 going to the movies and going to dinner and buying refreshments or whatever, probably even more, parking. But nobody wants to shell out $50 staying at home, no matter what the movie is. They're just not going to do that, and you're not going to be able to condition our culture to do that. So these movies have to come out theatrically. And the problem is, even now, if theaters do open, and even now if there's a vaccine available, how long is it going to take to inoculate everyone? And quite frankly, I'm not going to be eager, as much as I'm a man of science and I do believe in vaccinations and things. I am not going to line up to receive a vaccine that was put on the fast track, the warp speed track, to get made. I don't think there's enough information. There's not enough long-term information, side effects. I mean, just go back and watch I Am Legend. There's a lot of truth in our horror and our science fiction. I Am Legend, if you're watching that movie, Emma Thompson's like, yeah, we have this cure for cancer, and look at how that worked out. And now I'm not saying that you should be necessarily fearful of a coronavirus vaccine, but when something is fast-tracked to be brought to market, and, because we need it, I get it, that just, it worries me. But anyway, it's not like we're going to go back to normal in 4 or 5 months or even a year. It's going to take some time. So the fact is, the studios are still left with these movies that they need to open theatrically. And the reason that they pushed movies like the Fast 9, the Fast Saga, whatever it's going to be called, or Dune, or any of these other films that were going to come out this year, is because they were hoping that things would be back to normal. That's why they pushed them a year ahead. They figured it's got to be back to normal in a year, right? Well, that doesn't look like it's necessarily going to be the case now. So the fact is, do studios take a bath? I don't care what you say. Tenet, $350 million worldwide on a $200 million movie, where the studio gets half that, and then Christopher Nolan has his rich 20% of the gross deal. I mean, Warner Brothers took a bath on Tenet. They took a bath on Tenet. Christopher Nolan can spin it any way he wants. God love you, Christopher Nolan. I love your work, buddy. But it's like nobody wanted to make $350 million on a movie that cost $200 million to make. So the studios are in a world of hurt. And part of the thing about the ecosystem of movie theaters and studios is that usually there was like a 3-month window. So the studios know you can release a movie in the theaters, and if it's a big movie like Avengers Endgame, you can make $3 billion. And all that is advertising for the home when movies are brought home or on iTunes or wherever it is you like to get your films from, if you buy them digitally or if you're still like me and buying physical media. A big theatrical success story also then becomes a big success story with ancillary markets, whether it's digital downloads, physical media, whatever. It drives the whole industry. So we need those theatrical windows in order for things to stay viable. But at the same time, you have movie theaters dying on the vine, and you have studios not knowing what to do with their movies that they keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Interest payments are racking up. There's articles, you covered them on this show. MGM's paying $1 million a month for No Time to Die. And now they know they're going to, from now until when they've April, I mean, that's another $6 million. And that's, where does that money come from? And this is tough. So right before I went on at 1:30 today, 1:30, an article dropped on Deadline that Universal, this is just, it's a necessity, but it's not good. This isn't a good thing. Universal and Cinemark Inc. shortened theatrical window, PVOD, share pact in wake of AMC deal. It should come as no surprise to hear that Cinemark and Universal have hammered out their own truncated theatrical window and premium VOD share deal in the wake of the one AMC linked with the Hollywood major studio at the end of July. So this is the second deal that Universal has made with a theater chain. The first was with AMC. Cinemark CEO Mark Zoradi, a former president at the Walt Disney Motion Picture Group, understands the studio side of the balance sheet and has been more flexible about creating a dynamic window than number 2 exhibitor Cineworld Regal boss Mookie Greidinger. Again, the Cinemark Universal deal isn't a shocker because Cinemark has already been playing Universal and Focus titles on a shortened window of late, i.e. Come Play, Let 'Em Go, and Freaky, in sync with AMC. Universal Filmed Entertainment Group's new multi-year deal with number 3 U.S. exhibitor Cinemark calls for a 31-day theatrical window on those Universal and Focus titles opening to north of 50 million at the domestic box office, which, as you can imagine, won't happen for a while, and 17 days on all titles opening to under 5 million, which is everything that's been coming out for the last year. Thereafter, in both cases, Universal has the option, keyword option, to take either types of movies to PVOD, with Cinemark getting a cut of that U.S. revenue stream, which is rather generous, I should say. And just because a movie is on PVOD doesn't mean Universal completely pulls the movie from theaters. Rather, it'll try to capitalize on both revenue streams as long as it can. The full terms of the deal are confidential and are not being disclosed, but here's what I know from sources. About 10% of PVOD revenues on a title have been set aside for exhibition. Of that share, AMC and Cinemark respectively get 15 to 17% of that, which translates to between 1 to 2% of the entire PVOD pot, which a major studio typically realizes 80% in monies. So that's how this is working. AMC boss Adam Aron recently heralded in an earnings call the truncated focus release of Kajillionaire. We at AMC made more money with the theatrical PVOD combo than we would have had it been exclusively in theaters with a 74-day window, he said. Kajillionaire only grossed $531,000 at the domestic box office, and heads scratch in regards to how much more this quirky Miranda July-directed Sundance Film Festival movie could have made in ancillaries. Go figure. The movie wasn't a pure PVOD play like Universal's Pete Davidson dramedy The King of Staten Island, which sources figured grossed $30 million to $45 million, which for that movie, even though I know it's Judd Apatow, but man, it's not bad. Universal's century-long partnership with exhibition is rooted in the theatrical experience, and we are more committed than ever for audiences to experience our movies on the big screen, said Donna Langley, chairman, UFEG, in a statement. Mark Zorati and the team at Cinemark have been outstanding partners, and Peter Levinson, vice chairman and chief distribution officer, UFEG, has done a remarkable job on the studio's behalf in making deals that give us confidence to release our movies in the marketplace, keep the content pipeline moving, and provide consumers with the optionality that they're looking for. Added Zorati, we are extremely pleased to further enhance our strong partnership with Universal as we evolve the exclusive theatrical window. We believe a more dynamic theatrical window whereby movie theaters continue to provide an event-sized launching platform for films that maximize box office and bolsters the success of subsequent distribution channels is in the shared best interest of studio exhibitors and, most importantly, moviegoers. To Universal's credit, and the safety net to those exhibitors braving it during the pandemic by staying open, they're the only major Hollywood studio putting out new wide-release fare. Universal got slack up front about going day and date with DreamWorks Animation's Trolls World Tour, which spurred Aaron to scream publicly at the studio, but when cool heads prevailed, a shortened theatrical window with a shared PVOD stream for theater owners prevailed. Universal owned the #1 film during the pandemic over the last 3 weekends, with Focus's Come Play and Let 'Em Go and Freaky this past weekend. Upcoming for Universal and Focus are DreamWorks Animation's The Croods: A New Age, Focus's Half Brothers, All My Life, News of the World, and Focus's Promising Young Women. Now, that's pretty cool for Universal to be playing ball like this, but how long is that going to last? I mean, it's great that they're trying to keep the studios alive, or the studios are trying to keep the movie theaters alive, and I very much appreciate what they're trying to do, but how long is that going to last? I mean, eventually the studios, if the studios get tired of sharing the pie with movie theaters, and if movie theaters actually think, well, you know, we're actually making more money in a partnership with studios with this PVOD window than we would be if films are just playing in our theaters, well, then why would they even have theaters in the first place? Why do that business? And eventually the studios are going to be like, well, the only way that we're going to be able to have this PVOD revenue sharing stream is if you have movie theaters that are open. But if movie theaters are actually making more money from this sharing of revenue that the studios are only sharing because the movie theaters are open, I don't see as this is ultimately going to be a great incentive to keep movie theaters open in the long run. I mean, it's tough. We have to beat this pandemic. We have to get people back into the movie theaters. We have to get them working at full capacity. And we have to make it so a movie can make tens of millions of dollars its opening weekend the way they used to be able to make movies or money. We have to be doing that. It's got to be something that we're always looking forward towards doing. Now, will that even happen? I don't know. I really don't know. And while I appreciate Universal's efforts on behalf of the movie theaters, I just, at the end of the day, it's why do it? You know, I just see that this is, and I'm not a doomsayer. I don't want to be like, I don't want to be like somebody saying, woe is me, the sky is falling. But I just want to be pragmatic about how all of these things work. And I just see these, I understand what Universal is doing, but I also see that everyone's saying that, well, you know, at the end of the day, remember, like during the week, it's not like movie theaters are doing bang up business unless they have something in theaters like an Endgame, and those only come around once every, well, never. There's never been anything like Endgame. And unless you have that kind of draw, movie theaters really only make the bulk of their money on Fridays, Thursday nights, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. But the rest of the week's kind of a wash. And I don't know. I mean, I love going to the movies. I was conditioned to going to the movies. I just, it's one of my great joys in life, and I would hate to see that go away. But I understand. I just think that it's a slippery slope. And it worries me on one hand. I mean, I think it's great what Universal is doing with Cinemark. They're doing what they have to do to survive, but where's it going to lead, folks? Where is it going to lead? I don't know. Anyway, just thought I'd talk about that. Now, as we all know, on Whining About Movies, we've been doing an exploration into all the James Bonds. We've watched a movie from each Bond. We're going to wrap up tomorrow with Skyfall on Whining About Movies, and they've been fun. And we've been receiving more letters to Whining About Movies lately than I've been getting here to Robservations. And I got one from the chairman, Jeffrey Mao. And, I figured I could read it on Whining About Movies, but I wanted to save this one for this channel. I always feel like if I read, I want to get the widest possible exposure for our chairman Mao's letters. So I'm going to read this one about James Bond. Greetings once again, Rob and Elizabeth, and to all of the Eliza viewers. It is I, the chairman of the non-stop James Bond party. You are expecting a different party? Writing to you with another letter on our favorite British secret agent. Since you had already reviewed Goldfinger, I wanted to talk about how the film compares to the book, and a larger comparison between the film series and the Ian Fleming book series. I believe that our man Calvin Bowes had also started to read the Fleming novels from the beginning and was writing in reviews on each, but I don't know where he has gotten to. The one interesting thing to note off the top is that the James Bond film series does not match the book series in terms of order. Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger, the first three Bond films, are the 6th, 5th, and 7th novels, respectively. In terms of the impact of that, it's fairly minimal, as the books, like the films, were fairly self-contained and episodic. However, recurring characters and events in previous books are mentioned. At the beginning of From Russia with Love, note the slight title change, with a comma in between Russia and with. It is mentioned that Bond and Tiffany Case from the previous book, Diamonds Are Forever, attempted to live together in Bond's flat off the King's Road. By the way, the films never mention Bond's longtime loyal housekeeper, May, or his secretary. Yes, Bond had a secretary, or rather the whole 00 section did, Miss Lilia Ponsonby. Ponsonby. However, those are minor details. The one theme that does run through No, Russia, and Goldfinger run is that of Bond becoming a bit older and more aware of his mortality after numerous dangerous missions and close calls with death. Bond has already had 2 serious long convalescences after missions, in Casino Royale and Moonraker specifically, though he clearly does not end any mission without injuries and scrapes. Bond in the books gets realistically more injured more often than he does in the films. He's not the young, fresh 00 that he was in Casino Royale. Specifically for Goldfinger, this is a case where it could be said that the film improved on the book. The book is interesting in that it is rather longer than its predecessors. It has a more moody tone, where at times Bond gets almost kind of pessimistic about his job and what he's asked to do with it. In the film, Connery Bond shows no regret or second thoughts or issues with his job, which reflects in the attitude of a still young Bond. The book follows roughly the same plot as the film, and the film is pretty faithful in that respect. Where it diverges is in how it tightens up and speeds the viewer along, cutting out complications. Goldfinger, in book and film, is pretty much the same character, but in the book he's a Soviet agent, being the treasurer of SMERSH. Operating at the behest of Moscow, he seeks to sabotage Western economies by robbing Fort Knox of all its gold, whereas in the film, he is a nominally independent operator, although backed by communist China more out of expediency than political motivation, who seeks to sabotage the Fort Knox gold to increase his own gold's worth. The salient point being that the film Goldfinger's plot is paradoxically more sensible than the book Goldfinger's. In other differences between the book and film, Tilly Masterson plays a larger role in the book. She is not killed in Switzerland, but rather she and Bond are both captured by Goldfinger and coerced into assisting him with his plans. This is how Bond gets out of being cut in half by a saw in the book, whereas it's the famous laser in the film. She does die, though, later during the Fort Knox attack. The whole bit where Tilly and Bond are made into essentially secretaries for Goldfinger to handle his meeting with the mob bosses is kind of odd, and it's not a surprise that the filmmakers decided to ditch that whole part. In the book, Goldfinger seeks to enlist the aid of various organized crime groups as he needs their assistance to complete the robbery. In the film, they are all summarily executed before the plot even begins, and I think that was a subtle nod from the filmmakers saying, yeah, we're not even going to go there. Pussy Galore in the book is the leader of a lesbian gang out of New York, whereas in the film she is the leader of Goldfinger's all-female pilot team. It's a minor change and one that makes more sense than the film since Tilly was already killed off and there is no other Bond girl. The other advantage of changing Pussy to a pilot is that it explains how Goldfinger had access to airplanes and simplifies the final scene and avoids all the hijacking that takes place in the book. An atomic bomb is involved in both book and film, although in the book it is intended only to open the vault's doors. I'm not exactly sure how this would have worked in practice, given all the radiation involved. Bond drives an Aston Martin in both book and film, though it is a DB3 in the book. He utilizes a sound-only homing beacon to track Goldfinger's movements, and part of the surprise in the book is that Bond has to guess where Goldfinger is going based on the strength of the signal, as opposed to the handy-dandy GPS gadget in the film the DB5 has. The final scene in both book and film takes place on a plane, but in the book it is Odd Job being blown out the window after the cabin depressurized. Bond kills Goldfinger the old-fashioned way by strangulation. To close, I've done a little looking up on the most recent James Bond novels to kind of get an indication of how the character is being treated in the books and see if that approach could work for the films. When John Gardner revived the official James Bond novel series in the early 1980s, he clearly intended that Bond was the same character as Fleming's. The same as Roger Moore's, George Lazenby's, and Sean Connery's Bond are all the same character. After John Gardner died, the writing duties passed to Raymond Benson, who was a writer of Bond books such as The James Bond Bedside Companion, of which I had an autographed copy by him, through my membership in the James Bond fan club. I never read any of Benson's Bond novels, although I read all of Gardner's except the last two. I think I stopped with Broken Claw. As is evident with spin-offs and continuation series of any franchise, the longer you go, the more repetitive and less interesting and entertaining they get. So after Benson left the series, it passed through the hands of various authors, no one writing anything close to Gardner or Benson in terms of volume. What's interesting, though, are the very different takes. If there's one thread common to most, it's an attempt to return to Fleming's roots with period-set stories and being written as close to Fleming's tone as possible, and in the case of the last two, based on unpublished Fleming material. Out of the 5 post-Benson Bond novels, 4 are set either before, during, or very soon after the time frame of Fleming's original books. Only Jeffrey Deaver's Carte Blanche from 2011, which I have right up there, features a rebooted contemporary Bond similar to Daniel Craig's in terms of age. So for anyone interested, I encourage you to find those books and give them a read. So there you have it, Rob and Elizabeth, and the rest of the PGS. I hope this was an interesting look into the literary background of Bond. I could definitely write a ton more as I'm fascinated by the comparisons and the contrasts, and I expect to see more from you as you move through the series. Once again, I am, as always, your humble chairman, and thank you for reading. Well, Jeffrey, I can't thank you enough for these letters. Very thoughtful and thorough, and thanks for taking the time to write them. They're quite long, and I really enjoy reading them, so thank you for that. And for those of you who maybe have never watched Whining About Movies, I thought our last show last night on GoldenEye, which we were joined by Post-Geek Singularity member Roberto Suarez, who you've known from videos here, and he hosts the Zoom calls for the channel. I thought it was a really good show. So if you like GoldenEye, which is obviously from 1995, I can't believe it's 25 years ago, it was Pierce Brosnan's first outing as Bond, directed by Martin Campbell, who later went on to direct The Mark of Zorro, and he directed Green Lantern, and then, of course, he also directed Casino Royale, which is the first film with Daniel Craig as Bond. So that's pretty cool. So thank you for that. I very much appreciate that. This next one comes from Greg Klein. Greg says, Rob, in your last Robservations, you mentioned the painstaking research that David Simon did while spending a year with the Baltimore City Homicide Unit, which was the inspiration for Homicide: Life on the Street, The Coroner, and arguably his most famous work, The Wire. This inspired me to write you about a professional relationship I had with one of the real-life police officers whom Mr. Simon worked with during his time in the unit. Many of you in the Post-Geek Singularity may not know that Baltimore City is one of the few cities in the United States that is its own jurisdiction and not part of a county. Therefore, Baltimore County and Baltimore City are two separate entities. One thing that bound them together, however, was Lieutenant Jay Landsman. If the name sounds familiar to Wire fans, it's because there was a character named Jay Landsman on The Wire who was played by Delaney Williams for the entire run of the show. Ironically, the real Jay Landsman auditioned for the role that was inspired by him, but didn't get the part. The real Jay Landsman later played Captain and later Major Dennis Mello on the series beginning with Season 3. His character, Mello, was usually shown giving briefings to the officers in the Western District and always finished his announcements with, "Don't get captured." David Simon spent an entire year with Jay while doing his research for his book Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets. Jay worked as both a Baltimore City homicide detective and later as a Baltimore County police officer. I had the privilege of working with him at the latter as he was assistant director of our unit until he finally retired in February of this year. As a matter of fact, his retirement party was the last large public gathering I attended before the world shut down because of COVID a few weeks later. Jay spent almost 47 years serving both Baltimore City and Baltimore County as a dedicated police officer. Like his character on the show, he was always causing trouble and usually politically incorrect when he spoke to you. He is enjoying his retirement now, but every now and then still pops in to say hello to his fellow officers. I myself am a civilian, but I have the utmost respect for all police officers, except those few who don't know how to behave or act correctly, and I just wanted to share my story with you. Like you always say, everyone has a story to tell. You just need to hear it. Take care of yourself and your family during this difficult time in which we all live. That comes from Greg Klein from Rarestown, Maryland. Or wait, Restertown? Is it Restertown? Reisterstown, Maryland? Forgive me, sir. I mispronounced the town you live in. Reistertown? Reistertown? I don't know. But I'm sorry for that. But I want to say, what a great letter. This is why I love doing this show. One of the things that I never take for granted is I constantly find out that people that I would not expect to watch this show do. And the people that I've met, at least through letters or through people reaching out or emails I've received, I'm constantly amazed at the level of quality people that are members of the Post-Geek Singularity. What a cool letter this is. Now, Greg is writing this letter in response to the article and the things I was talking about authentic storytelling, and how there are some groups now that are telling telling people how they're telling writers how they should portray certain groups, and I obviously have a problem with that. And I think if you are somebody like David Simon and you spend a year immersed and working alongside police officers, finding out what they do, you know what makes a good police. You understand. And whether that person is black, white, straight, gay, religious, not religious, I think a great writer doesn't have to be a great police officer to write a great police story, because they have to just be a great storyteller. And when you do your research and you immerse yourself in these kinds of worlds and talk to people and interview them and really get to know them, a great author can glean enough information that they can bring to life stories. That's why I think authentic stories can, well, be written by everybody. It just depends how much time they take to do it. And by the way, a good story isn't necessarily served because you know a lot about a person in real life. Sometimes, obviously, stories are stories. And real life, as Alfred Hitchcock said, drama is real life with all the dull bits cut out. And while I think, sure, Spike Lee was probably the best director for the Malcolm X movie, I don't think that a Malcolm X movie that was going to originally be directed by Norman Jewison would necessarily have not been a good movie as well. But I'm glad Spike Lee got to tell Malcolm X's story. I think that's important, but that's where this letter comes from. And I want to thank Greg for writing it in. And I'm fascinated by David Simon anyway. And I love hearing stories about how Greg worked with the real man and was able to give us some insight. So thank you very much, sir. I appreciate you writing in that letter. This letter is from our man Omar94. Omar writes in and says, Rob, some time ago I did a review for the movies Tequila Sunrise and Black Rain. I wanted to continue that and write another review. And that movie is Michael Bay's Armageddon. I finally saw it after years of saying to myself I would get around to it, even though I'm not really a Michael Bay fan, and I finally did. While it was better than I expected, I still did not like it that much. Come on, man. Armageddon's one of the great guilty pleasures of all time. I could watch it all day, every day. Anyway, and I don't think it's a great movie, but it's wildly entertaining to me. The main problems I had come from the common tropes seen in all of Bay's films, like the slow motion, the crude humor, the extreme patriotism, and the corny dialogue. The plot points would work better if it was done in reverse. The movie has oil drillers training to be astronauts in order to save the Earth. However, I think it would have been better if it were the astronauts training to be drillers, as that would make more sense. I know nothing about being an astronaut or a driller, but I'm pretty sure it takes a much longer time to become an astronaut than it does to become a driller, so it would make more sense for it to be astronauts becoming drillers than the reverse. Can't argue with that point, Omar. Also, there were so many pointless characters in the movie, and where I kept thinking to myself, why are they in the movie? I felt you could cut them out and still have the same story. The two characters in particular which are like that are Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler. Oh, well, you don't want to miss a thing, do you? All of their scenes were pointless to me, and the movie would have been better if they were cut out, and the focus was solely on Bruce Willis working with a team trying to save the Earth. I also didn't really buy their relationship, as I feel in a lot of movies, love stories have to be pointlessly shoehorned in for some unexplained reason. I brought up the humor earlier, and that was another problem. All the times when there were scenes meant to be comedic, I kept thinking to myself, why did that have to be in there? As it could have been cut, the story would be exactly the same. For example, when each member of the crew is with a therapist or someone and they all act differently, with Michael Clark Duncan crying for some reason. Come on. There's another moment when Michael Clark Duncan rips his clothes off and shows everyone his underwear. Another example is when members of the crew who go to space, like Steve Buscemi, go to a nightclub which ends in a fight and they get arrested. All those scenes, I kept thinking to myself, did not need to be in there, and I kept thinking to myself, these are the best people to send to space? I think the movie would have been better if it cut out all the dumb humor and the movie and characters were more serious, as the entire world is at stake, but a large part of the movie has characters being ridiculous. Those are just a few examples, but there are plenty of others. Another main problem is the length. It was too long at 2.5 hours, as I felt it was dragging quite a bit. It would have been better if it was cut by maybe 20 or 30 minutes. As I mentioned earlier, there were so many pointless scenes where it was meant to be funny, but didn't really serve any purpose to the story. So they could have been cut out. That would have made the movie better paced, and to have the story be more focused. All in all, that's my review of Armageddon, and it was just not my thing. I'm not a Michael Bay fan, but I still give the film a shot to see what it was like. I'm glad there are people who like it, but I'm not one of them. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, Omar, I do love your letters when you are discovering movies for the first time, but I've got to tell you this. I know you're young, but if you don't like Armageddon, there is a solution. And that is, say it with me now, everyone. You know what I'm going to say. If you don't like Armageddon, you know what you might like? Deep Impact. Yes, sir. You can't have Armageddon without Deep Impact, and Deep Impact is exactly what you want, Omar. And what I think is that we're better off for having both. I think, Deep Impact is the serious, introspective version of Armageddon. So, and I love Deep Impact, by the way. I think it's great. I literally do. I think it's a great movie. So, yeah. This letter comes from the UK from our friend Dean Mikitich. Dean writes and says, "Hey Rob and the Post-Geek Singularity, I am all for more diversity in all walks of life, and not just in the film industry. Recently, Disney announced that all future productions will have half of the people working on it be non-white. That's great, but how does that work? The question can also be applied to Oscars. Not everyone shows what ethnicity they are by their skin color, and no one puts on their CV what their sexual preference is or if they're disabled. Most people will not go around screaming about it, so everyone knows about them. So how will they know who to hire and not go by just their skin color? Let's say I went for a job behind the scenes on a film production and they like my CV and asked me to come in for an interview. When I walk into the interview, they will see someone that has a slight tan or olive in complexion skin and possible someone with Mediterranean ethnicity. Because I do not look black, Asian, or another ethnicity, that would put a black mark against me and stop me from working on the production? Because they've already reached their quota for Caucasians working on the production? Even though maybe I'm the next perfect candidate for the role. As I said, people don't put their ethnicity, sexuality, etc. on a CV. They also don't put their family trees on it either. In reality, I'm a third-generation mixed-race person. On my father's side, my great-grandfather was Croatian, where the surname comes from, and my great-grandmother was Indian. My father's mother was also mixed, being of Portuguese and Indian descent, so I have quite a mixture of ethnicity from my father's side, while my mother was Scottish. Does that make me Caucasian? No, but it also doesn't make me Asian either. My grandfather grew up with Indian culture at home. This was also the same environment that my father grew up in. However, Indian culture was never passed on to me or my sister. The reason for this is that my father's family moved from India in the 50s and had to adapt to life in the UK so they could fit in. They still retained Indian culture at home. As I said before, my father joined the Royal Air Force, so he had to adapt again to the culture there. That is the culture my sister and I grew up in and was a part of my life for nearly 20 years while my father did his 25 years of service. This does not mean I never interacted with family members on my father's side. I would see that Indian culture every time we visited. The woman being in the kitchen making all sorts of curries and other foods that would last a week. It was the 80s. And the men watching sports or films. When they tried to help in the kitchen, they would get kicked out. In the evening, there was always a big family party. As for disabilities, I don't have any that are visual, but I am dyslexic and struggled with it at school, and it took me years to work around it. I still have issues with it today, but I don't bring it up in job interviews, and I don't put it on CVs. So again, how will these film productions know who to hire? There's far more diversity from people than just their skin color, and we don't always talk about our ethnicity or our sexuality. Would it be acceptable to ask people in a job interview what their sexuality is or if they have a disability? No, it would not. And if they did, and then did not get the job on one of those grounds, then you could sue them for discrimination, which will open a whole can of worms from any employer. I don't know about the States, but it would here in the UK. On a side note, how long can they keep these new policies in place? 50 years? 100? There are more and more mixed-race people being born every year. It will get to the point where we are so mixed up, no one will be pure black, white, or anything else. You heard about my ethnicity and how mixed up it is, which means I meet with some of their criteria, and you would never have guessed that from my skin color. As for my kids, well, it gets even worse. They are fourth-generation mixed-raced. My wife is Israeli-British, and she got Canadian and Polish in her as well. But if you looked at my kids, you'd think they're Caucasian, which is the furthest thing from the truth. Peace and long life. Dean M. P.S. I love the new show with Dieter, though my bank account may hate you. Dean Mikitich. Well, thanks, Dean. Look, we've always had a problem with race in our country, basically because we've all been a bunch of racists for the entire time America's been around. As I've said on the show, black Americans have never been treated equally, not in over 400 years. So right now we're going through an evolutionary period of time where I think where a lot of people that were once marginalized are getting a chance to have their voices heard, which I think is a good thing. You know, whether you're LGBTQ, whether you're black, whether you're an indigenous person, whether you're Asian in this country, we're seeing more diversity all the time. But you see, I thought, I'll tell you something. This is going to seem strange. Maybe I've said this on the show before, but maybe I haven't. I went and saw Step Up to the Streets. I went and saw it at the Grove. In that movie, the good guy gang is the good guy dance crew is very ethnically diverse. And I remember thinking, well, how cool is that? You have this ethnically diverse group of people and young people that are literally all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds, and they're the good dance crew. And I thought to myself, how far we've come. This is the first time I was ever in a movie thinking, wow, that's pretty neat. Well, if you look at our demographic breakdown in this country, how many people of different ethnicities there are, what percentage, the people that go into the motion picture business is a very small percentage of all of those ethnicities, whether it's white, black, brown, indigenous, Asian, whatever. And this idea that we're starting to put quotas on things, it's such a weird thing because we were already so far onto the road of inclusion and diversity. It was happening naturally. But because there's vocal groups of people that are stepping up thinking, there's still this problem. Sure there is. There's a problem because human beings are genetically predisposed to being racists. We see somebody that looks different than us. I mean, it's a vestige, or it's a throwback to our genetic sense memory from 100,000 years ago. You know, if somebody doesn't look like you, you run away from them because they'll kill you, maybe. And so we still have that sort of thing in us. But Dean, as you point out in your letter, more and more people are have mixed race marriages, or having mixed children. And as people travel more, we are definitely on a path of being a lot more accepting. And of course, in Europe and things like that, there's a lot more diversity because you can travel a lot more and you're all closer together. In America, you can see wide swaths of this country where there's not a lot of ethnic diversity. And I think that one of the things about America is we're like a bunch of different countries all under the one umbrella of America. But it's going to get better. It's always been getting better. And at the end of the day, until it doesn't matter to anybody, which we still have a long way to go until we get there, but this idea that we're going to discriminate against people because of their ethnicities, because where their ancestors happen to reside, yeah, you know why you're black? Well, because your ancestors were living under the hot sun and you were outside a lot, so you developed certain characteristics to protect yourself from the elements. And that's been basically true of all of our ethnic diversity. The fact that we can even procreate with one another at all proves that we're all the same species. There is one species. There is the human race. And I'm hoping, at least for the rest of the time I'm walking around on this planet, that we all we were learning to live together more. And I think with social media and things, I do see that the younger generations seem to be quite, living with, I have to say, with Elizabeth and her daughters, they have very diverse groups of friends, and that's really great to see, and nobody seems to really care anymore. And I think that's the best way to be, that nobody eventually will care, because why should you? We're all part of the human race, and the vestiges of racism, hopefully we will throw those off of ourselves, the oppression of that. And while it hasn't gone away, obviously it's still here, but until I'm a meritocratist. I believe that the best person for the job should get the job. And then, people always say to me, but Rob, there's so many people that never had the opportunities that you had or other people had to get good at those jobs in the first place. And my answer to that is, well, you got to work harder then. Just like anybody has to work. If somebody doesn't cut it, then they have to work harder to get better. And sometimes people have to work harder than the next guy. There's a lot of people that are born with natural abilities that I don't have, that I'm never going to have. Is that fair? No, but that is just the way it is, because the universe is indifferent to your suffering. We need a world, though, where everybody has the opportunity to explore these options. And I think that's the way it's got to be. So, yeah, we'll see. But it's getting better. It's getting better. But thanks for writing in. I appreciate that. You made some very, very good points. Let's see. This one comes again from our friend Pedro Ferreria. Maybe I'll get his name right one day. Hello, Rob. I hope you're well. I've decided to venture into 4K territory with a new player. However, I'm having trouble with aspect ratios. Really? Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure for some reason displays at 185 on my Samsung 4K TV, even though the film is 235:1. Meanwhile, 185 movies like E.T. display in mostly full screen, apart from a very tiny, almost unnoticeable black bar on the top and the bottom. Not sure what's going on there. Well, you have to make sure that your TV is set to full. Usually it is full. Otherwise, the TV itself is playing around with your aspect ratio. Unfortunately, I was unable to join your live stream some days ago because I was lured to another live stream by an attractive redhead called Judith Hogue. Yeah, from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm sorry, Rob. You're a cuddly guy, but Judith is a cuddly woman in a sexual kind of way. You can't say that about people on YouTube. She's new to streaming and doesn't even have a mod yet. She's trying to stay as politically neutral as possible, so let's see how long that lasts. Judith seems really excited. She's finally getting her own Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle action figure as well. It'll be interesting to see what other actors or actresses decide to open up on YouTube for live streams. A strange thing happened to me on Twitter this week. An author, I've never heard of her, tweeted the last election score results between Biden and Trump, stating it's time for Trump to give up and declare that Biden won. I responded to her agreeing and said they'll still probably be counting the votes next year, which will probably say something like Biden on 850 and Trump with 320 with more votes to count. For some weird reason, she blocked me, even though I was agreeing with her, but mocking how long the vote counting is taking. Have we got to a point on social media where people will block you even if you agree with them on something? I guess that's the internet for you. Well, I would say that some people don't understand a lot of the time what you're trying to say. Especially people that might be new to Twitter or are used to blocking people. Sometimes humor is very subjective, and a lot of people don't necessarily know what you're trying to say. Now, I wanted to ask you about something James Bond related. With the release of the new James Bond movie next year, there's a chance they might, if not immediately, remaster the non-Daniel Craig Bond movies in 4K. I keep wondering, would this not be an opportunity for mega fans who worked on the previous sets like John Cork to digitally upgrade the legacy extra features, as a lot of them are still in SD? I'm not saying to redo the documentaries from scratch, but to remaster them and the non-docs in better quality. A lot of the newer Bond movies, beginning with Die Another Day, do need more comprehensive making-of material as well. Surely, instead of repackaging the same discs yet again, MGM or whoever need to be going, do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to buy. What do you think? Kind regards, Pedro. Pedro, I'll tell you something. The problem with a lot of special features is when we were creating them up to about 2005, 2006, we were living in a standard def world, the NTSC world, the standard definition. The Lord of the Rings documentaries, I mean, as much as it would be cool to get those in 4K or HD, they were created in standard definition. They don't exist in any other format. Even the interviews, the raw interviews that we shot were shot in standard definition. So other than doing some kind of upscaling on all those documentaries, there's no way to get those. You can't like remaster them like you can a film because videotape is videotape. You're locked into the resolution that it was shot at. And when it comes to making new documentaries, there's just nobody left anymore that has anything. There's no money. See, before, when DVD was huge and DVD was making money for the studios hand over fist, they thought part of the reason was because of the special features, and that to a certain extent was sort of true. But as we've all found out, that of your audience, only 20% of the people that buy discs with special features watch them. And one of the big problems with that is, well, nowadays that money used to come from marketing. They considered special features marketing money, so that's where they got the money from. Well, nowadays they know that isn't true. The studios just aren't. There's no reason to create new special features for legacy titles like the Bond movies because they've been done to death. Could they have done better? Sure, but they're never going to be done again because all the information, all the materials that exist have already been mined. So, and also, who's going to pay for them? You still have to figure out, okay, there's a line item here. The Lord of the Rings documentaries cost in excess of millions of dollars. You went from $1.6 million to $4 million to $7 million, I think, with Return of the King, and that was for the special features because you had a team of people working for a year, traveling all over the world, and there's just that money isn't there anymore. Home video, people aren't selling the physical media is sales figures are dropping between 10 to 20% each and every year. So it's just the world isn't there anymore, unfortunately, and that's kind of a bummer. So yeah, kind of a bummer. Let's see. What do we got here? Well, I'm going to jump over and see what you guys are saying. What are you saying? Let's see. Willow's here. Willow says, I think the main reason why we've never had a coronavirus vaccine isn't so much because they're harder to make versus other pathogens, but because we haven't really needed one until now. Previous coronavirus outbreaks like SARS and MERS never became widespread. Even if the current vaccine candidates are safe and effective, it'll realistically be several more months before they become widely available to the general public. If the theaters are unable to last that long, how do you feel about a bailout? Well, look, I love movie theaters, but I just think, a bailout, I don't think movie theaters are necessarily a cornerstone industry like the auto industry was. They don't employ as many people. They're not a manufacturing thing. It's a service. Let's face it, movie theaters are a luxury. They're a luxury item. And I think, look, I'm with you. I would love movie theaters to get a bailout, at least to get them over the hump of people getting vaccinated and getting back to normal. But, it's really hard. It's really hard to say. I mean, I feel bad that that's kind of the case. But, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Stubble McShave says that, yes, Close Encounters of the Third Kind was released today 43 years ago. That is true. Today is the 43rd anniversary of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And which is pretty incredible if you think about it. Wow. I mean, in Seattle, on 6th Avenue, there used to be lines. The King Theater, where I saw Close Encounters, was across the street from the UA 150 where Star Wars was playing. And even though Star Wars was open for 6 months, there was still lines around the block. And there was lines for Close Encounters and Star Wars stretched down either side of the road. It's like a 4-lane inner city road. It was interesting to watch that. It was very exciting. A very exciting time. Man, I love Close Encounters. I remember the first time I saw Close Encounters. Remember John Williams' music, how it builds? Like, it's like, oh, and then you hear the ba. I still love that. And then it cuts to the snowy desert. Sonora, snowy desert, the sandy desert. I love that. I love Close Encounters. It's so good. Sub McShave says, would it be viable to have a premium version of a streaming service? The premium would be $5 more a month. If you have the premium, you get exclusive access to bigger movies for the 6 first months of their release. Do you think people would go for it? That's an interesting idea, but I don't think an extra $5 more a month would cut it in terms of paying for movies, because you need a lot more than that. I mean, if you think about it now, like Disney Plus is up to 75 million subscribers, something like that. It's past 70. So say 75 million, paying $5. Well, that doesn't help you out when you have a $200 million movie. And then you have to think about overhead. It's not like that $5 is just going to go to defray the cost of the movie. If you have a movie that's $200 million and you want it to make it $1 billion. So I don't think that it could work for smaller films, but for the bigger tentpole movies, I don't think that's the case. Torrin Atkinson, hello Torrin. Did you get my Ruin Nation trailer? Where did you post it? How did you send it? I don't have it. Is it a trailer for the film festival? We don't have a folder for Ruin Nation. So I don't know if you're glaring. You can send it to me directly. I don't know where. Have I skipped it over it or something? I don't know. So yeah, Stubble McShave says the line, "Do you expect me to talk? No, I expect you to buy," is the promo line that Mark Altman has for his Bond book. I think you know him a little bit. Yes, I'm going to see Mark Altman. I guess I'll see him in less than a half an hour. We're recording a new Inglorious Treksperts podcast on, believe it or not, Space 1999. Hence this shirt. I was there when the moon was blown out of Earth's orbit, so I thought I was being cheeky by wearing that. So yes, I didn't realize that, but that Bond book that they wrote, him and Ed Gross wrote, if you like Bond movies, it's an oral history of the Bond franchise. They interviewed so many people. It's really good. I really enjoyed his book a lot. So yeah, if you're a Bond fan, be introduced to that book. It's really, really good. So this next letter comes from Joe Dick, and yes, it always cracks me up when I read that. Hi, Rob. I disagree with the assessment of Bond in GoldenEye as sexist and misogynist. What does Brosnan's Bond do that would qualify? That he seduces a few women? M is addressing the audience when she describes in that way, telling us in 1995 that this Bond will have to be different. In Connery's day, no one was objecting when he slapped a woman on the ass or anything else he and subsequent Bonds did in later movies. No one objected at the time, or if anyone did, at least not enough people for it to matter. By 1995, that stuff wouldn't fly, and Brosnan doesn't do any of it. Nor would we have wanted him to by then. Judging by the culture of the time. The world had moved on by 1995, and that Bond doesn't act like it's 1964. The only criticism M made that was valid was calling him a product of the Cold War. I guess by that point it could still be said just. Since then he's struggled for relevance. I suggested a Q-type to be the new Bond, if Bond dies. Of the Ben Whishaw variety, of course. A Bond who doesn't seduce anyone, who works entirely from his computer, from home, who rarely leaves his apartment and socializes on social media. Or maybe there was a point to their conversation at the art gallery in Skyfall. Again, a conversation that was mainly for the audience. Every once in a while, a trigger has to be pulled or not pulled, that judgment requiring a field agent. He's no longer a product of the Cold War, and he's at least no longer a sexist or misogynist, if he ever was. Whether he's still relevant or not, I don't know. Well, that's a good letter, Joe. I mean, I've been thinking about that a lot. And I've said, is James Bond still relevant? Can you make a Bond film today and have it mean anything? One of the things that I think is very strange is the idea that Bond is a sensualist. He loves his sensual pleasures. He loves women. He loves great food, caviar, champagne, alcohol. These are the sensual pleasures he's indulging himself with, because at any moment he could lose his life. And what is one of the great sensual pleasures of life other than spending the night with a beautiful person, whether you are want to be with a man or being with a woman, having a night of passion, Well, what is there any better pleasure than that? No. And I mean, we bring our puritanical ideas to this, but I don't think it's thought of as much around the rest of the world. But I've always seen Bond as a man who is enjoying these sensual pleasures because every night could be his last. And I think that's so strange to call Bond. Bond is not a misogynist. He doesn't hate women. Bond loves women, but when he's on the job, every single person is expendable, male or female. When he sees in Goldfinger at the beginning, when someone is coming up behind him and about to club him in the head, Bond will not hesitate to use a beautiful belly dancer to take the blow for him so he escapes injury. That's part of his job. That's what he has to do. Does that make him a misogynist? If Connery in the same movie slaps Dink, his massage therapist, on the ass, I mean, he can get away with it because he's Bond and he might be dead tomorrow. And he has a certain way of doing things. Nowadays, it's so strange to me. I mean, I feel we're living in this weirdly desexualized time. And when we do see something that's overtly sexual, like 50 Shades of Grey, it's so adolescently sexual. And we're all like reverting back to school kids or something. I'm in elementary school. It's so bizarre. It certainly wasn't my experience when I was a young man in my 20s and 30s. Let me just say. But yeah. Anyway. Let's see who... Wow, a lot of people just jumped in here. John Suntress is here. John Suntress of the Word Balloon Podcast. Hello, John. How are you? John says, a quick tribute to the amazing Darwin Cook, who would have been 58 today, a master artist gone too soon. New Frontier, the Parker Donald Westlake comic adaptations, and the title sequence for the Batman Beyond cartoon. Let's see. I wonder if I can... I can't reach it. I have the Absolute Edition of the New Frontier. I'm a huge fan of Darwin Cook. I didn't realize today was his birthday. And he's gone way too soon. So, John, thank you. If you haven't listened to the Word Balloon podcast or found the videos that John's been doing, they're amazing. He even posted a couple of my interview with Rodney Barnes, who I very much enjoyed speaking to at the Baltimore Comic-Con. So thanks for that, John. Appreciate that. Jason S. says, do you know on the Lord of the Rings 4K if they'll redo some of the crappy CGI matte paintings? I'm hoping they'll recompose the CGI, as sometimes you have buildings in the front of the trees instead of behind them in some shots. I would imagine, now I don't know anything about this. I mean, I haven't worked on those movies since 2004, so I don't know. But knowing Peter Jackson, I'll bet you that they did do some of that work, that they fixed some of those things. They know. Factual Opinion says, sends in a tip and says, I've never seen Superman 2. What? Should I see the original or the Donner cut? Well, you know what? I would say watch the original first. I mean, I'd be curious to hear what you think of it, and then go back and watch the Donner cut, because the Donner cut is not a fully realized vision either. It's closer to what Donner wanted, but there's things you got to watch the original first. By the way, it's also got the Lester version, the original version of Superman 2 has one of my favorite lines in any superhero movie. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you'll know it when you hear it. It's something Superman says at a window. And so when you hear it, know that that's not in the Donner cut. It's kind of a bummer. A small-time Throg says, Jello. Well, Jello. Back to you, Throg. Yes, thank you for that package that arrived yesterday. I appreciate it. Zachary King says, Rob, very recently, Critical Drinker mentioned he was looking to do a live stream discussion of the following movies: Star Trek 1, Star Trek 5, and The Hunt for Red October. So take your pick, and I'm going to need you to flash dance that shit, son. Well, Zachary, it just so happens that the Critical Drinker contacted me as Heel versus Babyface expressed that I might want to talk to him. I'm a huge Critical Drinker fan, and I didn't know he wanted to do that. I would love to talk about Star Trek the Motion Picture with him. And I had said to him, maybe we'll talk about storytelling in general, but either one of those movies, I'm supposed to do a Star Trek 5 chat with some other folks, but Hunt for Red October or Star Trek The Motion Picture would be, I would love to do that. Maybe I'll throw that his way and tell him we should do that. That would be fun. Timula the Spider Monkey, Tim is here. Tim says, do you think with the popularity of streaming services during this time and no movies in the cinema, movie studios could move over to making long-form programming for companies like Netflix or Amazon and do away with theatrically released films? I hope not. Well, I'll tell you, I mean, why you're cutting out the middleman. Theaters now become the middleman. And let's face it, most of the movies that get made, lower budget stuff, I mean, I've seen a resurgence in horror. Look at Shudder. Look at Shudder and all the movies that are going to Shudder. And there are so many films like, look, I really like The Autopsy of Jane Doe. I've said that many times. That did get released theatrically, but a very cursory release. And to me, that's a movie that should have opened on 3,000 screens and people should have gone to see it. And I think it would have been a big hit, but you need the marketing budget to do that. Most movies are opening, well, they're starting their life on streaming services. That's how they are. And unfortunately, I think in our collective unconscious, movies that begin their lives streaming don't have the same, well, at least not now. It'll change in 5 or 10 years, but there's still this prestige value in movies being released theatrically, and every filmmaker wants their film released theatrically still, but nowadays, it's just a different world. So they could. I hope they don't either. I still like the movies. I like seeing any movie on a big screen. I'll tell you something. I think every single movie, I hear so often, well, you don't need to see it on a big screen. I'm like, well, yeah, you do. Every single movie ever made is better seeing it on a big screen. And with a decent sound system if it's got a great stereo mix. It's just, you want to be overwhelmed by it. You want to be immersed by a movie. And no matter how great your home theater is, you're still at home unless... I mean, hell, if I had an unlimited source of cash or something, I would build a movie theater size screen that, on my land. That's what I would do. I know a guy, well, I don't know if he's still alive, but I knew a guy in Marysville who had a giant barn, and he built a movie theater in his barn. It was amazing. And he had these 2 beautiful projectors from the Netherlands from the 50s. They were like his favorite projectors ever, and he restored them, and going to see his movies at his place was great. Timula the Spider Monkey, Tim goes on to say, also, I wanted to thank you for reading my letter about my grandfather on whining about movies last night. It was hard to write it out and also kind of hard to hear it read back, but it was therapeutic to some extent. Well, Tim, thank you for writing in. I have to say, last night's episode of whining about movies I thought was particularly good. So if you guys have never sampled that, I mean, you don't get as much of the dynamic of Elizabeth and I, but I thought it was a good episode. We really dove into GoldenEye, and I really liked the letters, and yours was obviously very, very emotional. So that was great. Alexander Wilson says, where can I send books to you? Well, I do have a P.O. box, which is on the website, but that gets sent to Iowa. And then, it takes me Mike collects that stuff, and I get it 6 months later. So maybe if you could DM me or something on Twitter, yeah. We'll figure out something out there. Jeff Yerke's here. Jeff says, hey, Rob, up tonight, Dr. No. What are your thoughts on it? Live long and prosper. The Yerk Man. Well, I really enjoyed Dr. No. I don't think it's top tier Bond, but as an introduction of the character, I mean, they didn't know if it was going to be successful. I like it. I like Joseph Wiseman as Dr. No. There's a lot of cool stuff. Ursula Andress is great. It's Honey Child Rider. And I should mention that some of the Midnight's Edge guys and I are going to start a weekly look back at all of the Bond films, and we are going to be doing Dr. No this week. I think we're going to do it on Thursday at 11 a.m. So that should be fun. And Jeff, how can you send me a tip and not mention Mrs. Y? You give Mrs. Y my best, and I hope she enjoys Dr. No as much. I will say this. I think From Russia with Love, which is the next movie after Dr. No, is one of the purest examples of Fleming's words turned into a movie. I think From Russia with Love is probably, of the early Bond films, probably the best adaptation of Fleming's work. So, pretty cool. Really like that. BL Alley says, don't send anything to Iowa. It goes in the trash. It does not. I get everything. It just takes a while. It doesn't go in the trash. Mike doesn't throw anything away. Well, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, however you identify from across these 28 known galaxies, I will say there's if you haven't seen the new movie that premiered today for the first Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival, check it out. There's a lot more to come. I think I'm going to have premieres all week long. We're in the last 2 weeks, but it's been a lot of fun. I got a lot of information to announce about the film festival that's really cool. And then, of course, we begin the short story contest. I've been getting a lot of inquiries about the short story contest. The short story contest, I will be starting to accept entries. It's not going to be a $25 entry fee. It's going to be like $10 because I might have to pay readers and things like that. But so it'll be like $10 to enter. And if the story's good, you're probably going to get in. But what we're going to do is, so it's a short story contest. It's going to be stories must be between 5,000 and 10,000 words. Now, what we're going to do is the book that we're going to publish, we are collecting these stories. You are writing stories to be published. So if we pick your stories, you are going to be published in a very nice volume. Now, you will be paid for your stories, and we are going to sell the books after the fact, so all of the authors will also participate in profit sharing. We do not license your work. We're only licensing it for the book itself. We do not own the stories. You retain the copyrights for each one of your stories. All we're doing is publishing it in this book. And the book is called The Imagination Connoisseurs. So whatever that means, that's what you're going to define in your stories. Kind of like, Black Mirror. It was so funny when I heard the title Black Mirror, I was like, what does that mean? And then I realized, well, you can't really, see, now it won't turn off. Well, imagine this is this side. This is the Black Mirror. The Black Mirror is the screens and the phones, the screens we're carrying around everywhere. So the book is called The Imagination Connoisseurs. And it's an anthology. So what does that mean to you? What does it mean I made up the term imagination connoisseur. As far as I know, I didn't read it anywhere else. Maybe I read it in a book 25 years ago. I don't remember, but I'd like to consider myself the author of that term. So imagination connoisseurs, what does that mean to you? And you don't have to define it in your short story. You can write a short story that you think would appeal to imagination connoisseurs. You can delve into any aspect of what being an imagination connoisseur is, what it means, what an imagination connoisseur would like. So the book is called that. That's sort of whatever, that's the theme, but go crazy. That's all you have to know. And the stories are between 5,000 and 10,000 words. And we are going to accept entries from December 2nd through February 14th, Valentine's Day. And then the plan is that I'm going to pick one of the stories in the book. First of all, we are going to publish a book, like a slip-cased anthology. But then I'm going to take one of the short stories. It's not really going to be it can't be the best short story, but it's got to be a short story that can actually be filmed. Because I don't want to, if you want to write a short story set in the depths of outer space, I do not want to dissuade you from doing that. And maybe we can make a movie like that. Who knows? But I would say that we're going to film one of the film between March 1st and May 15th. We are going to make a short film out of one of the stories that you guys send in. And the plan, actually, what I would really like to do, to be honest, is take that book, The Imagination Connoisseurs, and make like a 10-episode anthology to try and actually get it financed. And, we're not going to make it for lots of money, but it would be great to get it financed and see if we can, make the stories into films and stream it somewhere. Or maybe we'll just make it for the Burnettwork if we can find the financing. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. But anyway, so that is the plan. Alexander Wilson goes on to say, the first movie I saw with my dad was GoldenEye. He loved Sean Connery. That was the only Pierce Brosnan movie that I liked. Yeah, GoldenEye is still, I really like GoldenEye. Watching it again, I still like GoldenEye. Tomorrow Never Dies. And I like The World Is Not Enough more than most people, but Die Another Day is rough. So, yeah. unfortunately. What a bummer. Well, anyway, I'm going to bring episode number 557 to an end of Robservations. I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank my moderating staff, beginning with Mike Bodden and Greg Smith and the Richard. Obviously, look up the Richard on the Facebook pages, the Whining About Movies and Post-Geek Singularity Facebook pages. I want to thank Joshua Levesque is here. I want to thank Robert Pariso is here. I don't know if anyone else is here, but you guys are here, so thank you guys. Thanks for being moderators, and thank you for supporting the channel in many different ways. Thanks for writing in letters. You can always write me letters at the Burnettwork.net, just the Burnettwork.net website, and on the top right corner it shows where you can send letters, and just say now we're accepting letters for Let's Get Physical Media. I am hoping to drop Let's Get Physical Media episode 2 tomorrow. I want to drop them on every Tuesday. So we shall see. Anyway, and there's going to be more movies debuting all week long on the channel. And Torrin, I don't know where your trailer is. I'll find that. But I'll look into that. And I'm going to go record an episode of Inglorious Trexperts about Space 1999. So remember, let me switch my camera so I can get wide. I'll get wide for you. Look at that. I just pushed the sides. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, have a better day. And I mean that. I mean that sincerely.